Hey guys, John here, Montana Walleye Angler. Welcome back to the channel. Want to share with you some easy ways to get started catching walleye through the ice. Still a lot of the season left, and got some tips, got some things you can start. 4 quick things. They're going to help you catch more walleye through the ice. Let's get started. You know, it seems like I talk to fishermen often who want to target walleye, but just really struggle. Like, where do I start? Where do I begin? How do I catch them? And I talked to somebody recently on a outing I ran into, and we're like, hey, what species are you targeting? And so, well, like the goal is always walleye, and that's what we're targeting. And he said, we catching trout, but can't seem to really catch the walleye. And so it seems like I run into people a lot that kind of struggle, like, where do I begin? Where do I start? How do I do this? And they often just kind of like go out and set up on a spot and kind of hope for the best. And it doesn't really work in my experience. There's a couple key factors that are really going to up your odds if you're willing to just do some of these simple things that I found success in, and I want to share those with you today. And the first is really this, is just location. Like, you've got to be in the right location. You've got to start in the right location. And that really starts with this, is looking at your maps. And a lot of times we think like, I need the fanciest technology. I need the Hummingbird chip and in my Hummingbird unit. And that is super helpful. But Hummingbird also has an app. I'm going to show you that. Overlay some image here for you to kind of see. Super handy. And I would say it's even more helpful and handy during ice season, because unless you got like a 4-wheeler or whatever, which I don't, I'm pulling everything out by hand. It's a lot easier to hold my phone in my hand and to be able to look like, am I on this spot or am I not? As opposed to trying to hold your your shuttle with your Hummingbird unit and be like, hey, am I there? And you're just kind of like walking around, with this thing in your hand. And that's not really all that helpful, or at least easy. Ice fishing is all about like, maximizing your gear and making it a little bit easier to just to fish, right? And to get on spots. So your phone, the app, the Hummingbird app is a fantastic tool. I think it's like $25 a year. I'll put a link in the description to that. But that has been an invaluable tool for me. And I use it even open water season at times where I'm like, am I really on the spot or not? But you can, do all the same things that you can on your Hummingbird unit. You can do highlights, you can mark spots. And so often what I do before I even go, I have some spots picked out. And this is a spot that I had spent a little bit of time open water season, but I had never ice fished this spot before. And so had kind of a general idea location wise, but went out and just started punching holes, and 1, 2, 3 holes, and just started going through those holes to see, like, what am I seeing here? Am I seeing structure? And you can do that. You can definitely do that just with a flasher, whether you're using a Vexillar or whatever other kind of unit, or if you have Livescope. Livescope definitely. If you don't have Livescope and you're looking to get Livescope, it definitely, what it does is it just maximizes it. It speeds up the whole process of like finding structure, obviously finding fish. But I don't always look like, if I'm going out to a new spot, if you're in the middle of the day, often you're just not going to see those fish there. And so what you're looking for is the right kind of structure. And that's where location is just like absolutely key. Is like, you got to be on fish, and you've got to be on the right place where fish are going to be. And so this place I found after probably 30-40 minutes of just kind of looking around, I found a good break line. It went from like a good flat to a steep break to like 30-35 feet. And then there was another break. So there's kind of a plateau, and then it broke again into deeper water. And so a lot of times what happens is those fish are kind of moving off those deeper water sections in the evening. And that is exactly what happened on this outing. A few fish catches, kind of show you some of those. It wasn't a spectacular evening, but definitely caught fish. And so tip number 1 is you got to be in the right location. If you're not in the right location, man, it's going to be a frustrating experience. The second thing is you got to be willing to move. This is something that is often really hard, especially if you're pulling stuff by hand. And you kind of set up, and it's hard to, move around. But often what I do is set up the shack if it's cold, and then I go pop holes all around me, and just kind of cycle through that section. And so be willing to move, be willing to, if you're not seeing fish, in that kind of magic hour, be willing to, have those holes punched already so that you can kind of cycle through them. So that's tip number 2. Tip number 3 is this: you got to be willing to adapt to the mood of the fish. And this is something I go out with two things that I really typically want to use, and I'll show those to you right now. So I love to catch walleye on aggressive jigs. If I can do that first, man, that is absolutely going to be the way I want to fish, is on any kind of jigging presentation. Active, whether it's open water or ice season, I want to actively fish for or catch fish on jigs, plastics, whatever the case might be. But kind of my go-to, my start is the jigging wrap. And often I've just nailed specifically this color, have caught a lot of fish on your just active presentations. This triggers bites unlike anything that I've ever fished with before. This is just super active presentation. And so I always have this tied on, and just like open water season where you have like, whatever, how many rods you have and you got different stuff tied on, kind of do the same thing with all my my presentations during ice season. Typically go out on the ice with my rod case, and I got 4 rods and maybe some tip ups. And so those 4 rods have something different tied on. But really the go-to is going to be something like this for some sort of active presentation as fish come in to see if they're going to react. And in this outing, that just didn't happen. Sometimes I go out in like the magic hour, and while I start moving in, and they just hammer them. And it's a super fun way to catch fish. But on this particular outing, they were just not reacting towards it whatsoever. And so I kind of went to something a little bit more subtle. And that was kind of this classic, I think it's the Acme not hyper rattle, but it's just like a rattling spoon in that color there. And then I tipped it with, I think it's just like a smelt head or something like that. We can't use live bait here in our location, but you can use dead minnows, whatever the case may be, whatever you can kind of find. But I think that was key as well, as to have a little bit of meat, a little bit of scent on there. And as those fish came in, it just kind of like started to, raise that lure up away from them a little bit. And yeah, they just kind of nailed it. And so those are kind of 2 presentations, but you got to be willing to adapt. And, like sometimes like jigging it just doesn't work. And so we can utilize 6 lines here in most of our bodies of water here in Montana. And so if you can utilize, obviously some set lines as well, and that can be effective. Depending on the scenario, but my preference is definitely just to actively jig for them. But one more tip, and that is just like be willing to stay. Be willing to stay longer than maybe you normally would. I found that like as soon as it starts to get dark, those fish start to move. They start to move into those locations where they're going to feed, and there's just something about it. But the window, at least for me and what I've experienced, is like it's very, very short. Like the bite window is short, and some places it's just different everywhere. But some places, you can fish like into the dark and through the night, and catch fish. And I've done some ice camping outings where I was like, oh man, I'm gonna catch fish all night, and it just doesn't happen. There's just like kind of a short bite window, and that's what happened. A couple walleye moved in, and they were bitey, and so you got to be willing to stay. It's kind of the last person off the ice. And if you want to catch walleye, you have to fish in the low light period. Doesn't mean that you can't catch fish during the day. You certainly can. It happens. And I would say it's kind of, the exception, not the rule. Really, there are no rules when it comes to walleye fishing. The moment you think there's like, oh, this is a hard and fast rule, and you go out the next time and it's like, yeah, that just doesn't work. And that's the reality with walleye fishing. And maybe that's why I love it so much, is the challenge and to catch these fish. I mean, they're just such a fun fish to catch. But if you're willing to stay a little bit later, the location, find the right location, be willing to move and find the spot, until you're on the right piece of structure. Once you're there, be willing to adapt to the mood of the fish. Sometimes you can trigger the predatory, instinct in those fish, especially with those jig and wraps. I'm telling you, those things, if fish are negative, sometimes just that active, popping it around is enough to trigger a bite. But sometimes it wants something a little more subtle. So you got to be willing to adapt. But you also got to be willing to stay a little bit longer, whether that's getting there earlier or staying a little bit later for that low light period into like, you know, the first like hour at least of dark can just be key. And so I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it was helpful. Show you just some clips from the last outing that caught some fish. And stay tuned for more content. If you've not subscribed, love for you to subscribe. I think probably like 70, 80% of people that watch my videos are not subscribed yet. So do me a favor and go down, hit subscribe, and comment. Tell me what you like to see. I don't know about you guys, but I mean, there's still a lot of ice season left for us, but I'm looking forward to getting back in the boat and moving around quite a bit more. But tell me what you're looking forward to and what you'd like to see, and we'll see you next time. And hey, if you're interested in catching some perch through the ice this season, you're gonna wanna check out this video right here.